And we are live. Welcome to LSE Live Online. My name's Lee Stafford and I'm going to be your compere for the next hour and a half. Guys, if you've got any questions today whatsoever about the recipe that you see, about any other LSE recipes, anything to do with the industry, anything that's on your mind, there's no such thing as a silly question. Please put it in the chat and we'll answer all your questions as we go along. If you want to subscribe to the channel where you'll be notified of any other new material that's dropping, please click the bell next to subscribe. And thank you very much for being here today, guys. I know there's plenty of things you could be doing right now, so we really appreciate you spending some time with us. Okay, so today's LSE staff is a private educator, a session stylist, a multi-salon owner now, and an all-round top geezer. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Rory McPhee.
Good morning, good afternoon now, isn't it? Hi, everybody. Thank you, Lee, for that nice introduction. So as Lee said, my name is Rory, and I'll be taking you through one of the twisted LSE recipes today. But before we get started, just a little bit about me so you kind of know where I am and where I've come from. So I've been a hairdresser for around 15 years, something like that. It feels a bit strange for that long, but it is that long now. Yes, as Lee said, I kind of started off as a regular hairdresser, working behind the chair, and then throughout my career kind of found I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I found my way into education through Redken, which is where I actually met Lee. He was one of my first mentors through Redken. So through Redken, I met Lee, and then I came into the Lee Stafford fold, and then I've been working with Lee through Lee Stafford Education for quite a few years now, doing a lot of the recipes. But as a stylist, I do really specialize in design, which is cutting and also styling. And then just the last little bit, I do session work as well. So I have been based in London a lot until obviously COVID hit, and I have been more back in my hometown of Leeds now, but still do travel to London for session work in both styling and cutting. And that is things like photo shoots, music videos, TV, live TV. So if you have any questions about anything else like that, any advice I can give you about if you're thinking about getting in that world, assisting in that world, I know it's always a popular topic to talk about. Do feel free to ask me about that, or ask me about any form of education or how I got into education. And then, finally, as Lee said, I now do have 2 salons, so both in Leeds in different suburbs. The first one is Rory James, which is another suburb, and I'm now in my new salon, which we opened just before COVID, which is called Lab Hair Salon. So if you want to ask me anything about hair salons, owning hair salons, or any questions, like Lee said, any questions at all, I'm going to take you through today, which I'll talk about in a second, is a very fun cut, but it is very principally based cut at the same time. So there will be a lot of time to really ask as many questions and get as much information out of me for the next hour and a half that you can do. And as Lee said, there's no such thing as a silly question. If you have the question, someone else will be thinking about that question. So ask it, and then the answer will be provided, because I would hate you to be the person that when we turn this off in an hour and a half, you have a question in your head and you really wish you'd asked me it. But if that is the case and you really don't want to, you could always go on my social media, Instagram at Rory McPhee, and you can send me as many questions as you want there as well about this recipe, any Lee Stafford recipes, any help you ever want, or any advice. Feel free to just drop into my DMs and I will answer any questions for you. So yes, so today we're going to be doing a design. So that's design cut. So the cut that we're going to do is the one length above. So we're going to do the one length above, which I love because it's a really nice, basic, principally based haircut. And I do find that at the minute, everything is we're talking about colour and balayage and freehand, a lot of colour, and cutting is kind of getting pushed down the scale, where we used to find cutting was as Lee would agree, that used to be the top number unos were the cutters, and then colour was like the accessory. It's kind of going the other way, and I think we need to bring cutting back. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to be really strong in our foundations of our principle-based haircuts and the foundations of hair cutting. And then it's then about developing your techniques from that. And that's kind of what we're doing today. So we're using a lot of the foundations and the sectioning patterns of the one length above. But the difference is what we want to create is we want to create a one length that has a lot of softness and texture. So I don't know if you guys have ever found this, but if you do cut a one length above, sometimes it can feel, before you chip back into it and things, it can feel quite chunky on the bottoms, which is great if you want to have, say, what I call like a French bob, which is very chunky on the bottoms, not much layering and kind of moves softly and flicks, but it's not very layered. Beautiful for that. But for someone maybe that wants so much like more softer, almost, and it looks like it almost has some graduation in, but it actually doesn't really. That kind of really soft look, you sometimes you cut the one length, then you have to do a lot of point cutting, texturizing to start to make it taper. And when we're in the salon, we don't always have the time to do a one length above, then start really working, particularly with thick hair, a lot of texture into the bottom to give that really soft, it is a really soft tapered effect. And you can very easily put too much graduation into it and start to go into a graduated bob. And clients are very aware that they don't want a graduated bob. So yeah, this is kind of a look that's going to allow you guys to very quickly, in an express way, do a one length above that has a soft texture to it. But hopefully as we explore it, that will make a little bit more sense. So some of the things that I'm going to do slightly differently. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut all of this haircut with a razor. So this razor is a serrated blade razor. The reason I'm using a serrated blade razor is because all throughout the haircut, it's about creating shattered lines and not blunt lines. Even though I'm going to be working on a horizontal cutting line, so I'm going to create bluntness by that, I'm not going to be using my scissors to create a blunt line. Bringing a razor and a serrated razor in straight away is going to start to add softness for me. So I start to perforate, if that's even a word, it sounds like it should be, like break down the little line at the bottom so it starts to appear a little bit softer. And then I'm going to then show you, as we move up the haircut, how we can also use the razor in terms of where we go in to create that extra bit of softness. Then what we're going to do is, I've done another head. I'm going to do the wet cutting on this young lady behind me. And then after that, we've got a almost finished haircut that I have pre-done. I've left a few sections. And what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to show you a little bit of a micro fringe. And I'm also going to show you how you can finish off with the razor as well, either bluntly or even adding a little bit of shattering at the very end on dry hair. Because I know a lot of people have different opinions on how to. It's just at Rory McPhee, Lee, just at Rory McPhee. Whoever.
Oh, is it? Oh, sorry, mate.
That's all right. It should probably be at Rory McPhee head, but it's just at Rory McPhee because there's not many about. What it's going to show you is how to texturize at the end. A little bit of a micro fringe that we're going to do to give you a little bit of fun. And then, as I say, hopefully you will have a few learns and a few techniques from all of that. So unless there's any questions about the setup, I will just get on with it. And then, as I said, but honestly, do jump in whenever possible to ask me as many questions, and also give me feedback on that you can see everything really well. I've tried to light everything as well as possible for you. I'm going to try and make it so you can see the section, and even if that means I'm not where I'm normally stood or sitting, I will explain that to you. But if there's any point you can't see something, or you're thinking, how did he do that? Could we see it from a different angle? Please just do give us, ask us that as well, and I can definitely make it so you can. My job is for you to understand what I'm doing. So please do ask as many questions even in regards to that. So without further ado, I'm just going to firstly show you the sectioning. As I said, the sectioning is very much what we do with the one length above normally. So what I've done is I've created the diamond section through the front. This lady already does have a fringe, but it's a longer fringe. But if you remember on that section, we create a horseshoe section, and then we almost take a triangle for the fringe using the high point of the head, and then our recession areas, and we create that first triangle section. Them triangles then stop on the side, but then takes our side section down. So that's what was happened here. The triangle is finished. then it's come down to just behind the back of the ear. So now we've got our front triangle section and we've got our side sections. So then all we have to do then is then take our fringe section and carry the line on back to the back of the horseshoe. And then we do that both ways, and it gives us these smaller triangle sections. And then finally, the back of the horseshoe is then sectioned away as well. So we've got a horseshoe section that very much has two crossed lines that create 4 triangles in the head. And these will differ from person to person because we're using the high point of the head. That means what we're doing is we're starting to map out where the hair falls from on the head. So if people can have different, so it won't be the same for every single person. But if you're finding on different clients that this is slightly different, don't worry about that. That is what it's meant to do. It's meant to make the haircut fit the head as perfectly as possible. So we've got that triangle section, we've got the 2 sides, and we've got the back section here. Then all we've done then is we've just taken a vertical section down to the nape. And then all that happens then is we've then just sectioned it off into 2 sections. So we're very much now set up for the start of us doing our 1 length above. So as you remember, when we do our 1 length above, our first section we cut in quite a chunky section. And this is for things like if we have nape quills in the neck, if we have any jumps in the neck. By first cutting it in a big section, we then negate the problem of them, and then we can then go back and refine that afterwards. The only time I would ever say maybe not to do that is if you have very, very dense hair and you're finding that the size of the section is compromising the cut that you're doing. For that reason, then we might break it into 2. But for today, we are going to try to stick as close to possible as the recipe. So our first section, we've taken from just below the occipital bone to the middle of the ear, and then just below the occipital bone to the middle of the ear. And this is our first cutting section.
So tell me this, Rory, how similar or different is this pre-sectioning to a classic 1 length above?
To the classic LSE 1 length above, so far, the pre-sectioning is exactly the same.
Right, okay.
So the only difference in terms of what's going to happen with the pre-sectioning, and it's a little bit about how we cut with a razor or for this haircut, and also a little bit about the amount of blocks and models that I've got to work with today, is obviously with the LSE, we'd work up to where we have the curved sections, and then we'd then wrap dry straighten, refine, and then we'd then carry on through the sides. But because I want to cut the base perimeter in, I'm going to cut it in wet so I can get more tension and more control when I'm using the razor. I will just be working up the head and then around the sides with wet hair, and then even into then my crown area. And it's at that point I would then dry, refine, and then bring in my other head to kind of then do the finished dry. But that's the only difference, and it's only because I'm using a razor, and that's for control more than anything. So as I said, when I'm using the razor, I do want to make it quite damp at first because I do want to have tension in the hair. So I'm just going to damp it down with a water bottle that I'll have on hand all the way through it. If I was cutting this in the salon, I would be stood or sitting directly behind my section. So I'd be very much where my hand is now. But obviously, if I stand there now, you're not going to see what I'm doing. So just imagine that I would be stood here, and that's where my body positioning would be. So body positioning is very important because we know if our body positioning is off, it can sometimes cause us to drag the hair naturally to where we are, and that can cause over direction, which can give us extra length that we don't necessarily want. So if I was in the salon, best practice, I would be stood here negating any form of potential over direction. But because I want you guys to see what I'm doing, I am going to try do it in a way that you can still see it, and I'll still get it as over directed as possible through the midsections. So we'll say, go on, Blake.
I was just about to say, how popular are bobs at the moment in the salon?
For me personally, bobs are always popular. So bobs are kind of, they never really go out of fashion. I think that the problem with the bobs is if people don't feel confident and comfortable cutting bobs in the hour, 45 minutes we get given, a lot of people don't necessarily do them. But I mean, if you look to social media, I think there's so many people refreshing their looks with bobs. You've got so many people coming out of lockdowns that are just sick of seeing their hair and want a real change and are chopping their hair off. So yeah, I think now more than ever, bobs and cutting hair is really, really a big thing because people are wanting to see a change, and they don't want to see a change with the colour, because if they have some really wacky different colour and then we go to lockdown in 2 months, they're just going to see it growing down the head. Whereas if you've got a nice, really different but simple bobbin, if we go into lockdown for 6 months, it's just going to grow like it would do anyway. So it's a really nice way to now open up that conversation with people and talk about, let's get chopping hair off, because even if we lock down, it's better to have less hair rather than it just growing down throughout the lockdown. So
when you do your bobs, are lobs quite popular in the salon?
Yeah, lobs, bobs. I mean, that for me all depends on the person. That depends on the consultation you have with them, their lifestyle, how they manage the hair. A lob for me a lot of the times is the person who necessarily hasn't been that short before and necessarily wants to go there first before they go shorter, or someone that likes to wave their hair but straighten the hair and they need enough length themselves to wave it. One thing I necessarily kind of try to stay away from is I either make it a lob or I make it something quite stand out and take it almost quite, like I talk about, like quite a French bob, jawliney, because I think if we sit things around this area, it almost looks like you have not really dared to go for the bob, but it's also not the bob, and it kind of just hangs in the middle. It flicks off the shoulders 9 times out of 10, and it just becomes more of a hassle. And then for me personally, in experience, a lot of clients then don't want to have a bob again because it's just caused them hassle. Whereas sometimes consultation, you need to figure out, do they just want to try it at first and go for a lob and something softer that they can wave and have a bit of softness but can go up if it needs to do? Really going to go for something striking and different and let it almost trust in your skill set and make it powwow them into lobs. So so I've taken my first section. First section, we're thinking about, this is one of the key sections for any form of bob, because this is going to set our length for the whole length hair. We're doing a 1 length above, so we are doing a 1 length haircut all the way around. So we need to be really careful of what length we go to here. And particularly when we're using a razor, what I would potentially say is go a tiny bit longer first, assess it, and then you can always go back into it, because once it's gone, it's gone. But if you take it off and you want a bit more, you can take a bit more. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a middle section first. I'm holding the hair with quite a bit of tension and nipped between my fingers, and I'm going in just above my fingers. But when I'm going in, I'm not doing long strokes at the minute. I'm just doing very short strokes. I'm trying to create as horizontal line as possible. So I go in here, and I'm trying to create, as I say, as horizontal line as possible. And that's because even though I want softness, I still want the blunt line to be created that you create in a 1 length.
I love that. I love that already, Rory.
Now I'm going to go to the section aside. So I'm doing 3 sections first. So I've done the middle section, and then I'm doing the section either side before the head starts to curve away from me. So I'm taking this section here. I'm just following that again with my horizontal section. Then short strokes. Don't need to rush it. Sometimes if they've got thick hair, it can feel like you're doing it for a while. But as long as you've got a really fresh blade in your razor, then just keep going, and then you'll find that it just does start to come away. And then the final section before the head starts to curve on this side. Again, my fingers are going in. I'm following that horizontal line still. Everyone can see me. And then I'm just then doing the same thing on this side here. So then we've created that blunt horizontal line that you get with the 1 length above, but it's just started to shatter a little bit. So it's just started to come off a little bit. So I'm just going to jump in there. And sometimes you find you get these little bits that do fray out underneath. The best way to get them is just nip them in your hands and then just take them off again. And then you can build a really blunt line really quickly just by doing that. I mean, if I was in the salon, potentially I would also then, if I was worrying about time, you could pick up your scissors and point cut them underneath sections if you really wanted to do. But I do want to show you today that this is doable with just a razor. So if you are just using a razor, just pick your razor up and just take them pieces off. And then we've got that initial structure of the start of the 1 length above. Don't worry about it being 100% absolutely bob on here, because we are going to dry style and refine. What I would say is you want it to be 95% bob on. So it wants to look horizontal. You don't want any long pieces in it. You don't want any major unbalance to it. But if you're staring at it for ages and thinking, is there a tiny bit here? Is there a tiny bit there? I would dry and straighten first, and then refine it afterwards. So we've done that middle section. And then
tell me this, Rory, because normally when you would cut a bob with a pair of scissors, your cutting would happen underneath your fingers. Yeah. With the razor, it's happening above your fingers. Why is that?
I mean, I don't know technically if that's what you meant to do, but for me, the way I do it is because if I'm cutting below my fingers, I've lost the tension in this hair here. Because I'm wanting to create a blunt line. If I did it, I'll try to do it on this long hair here. I just can't get that same tension in there. Whereas as soon as I come above it, all of this hair has a lot of tension to it. So I can go in there and really pinpoint where I want to put the lines. But yeah, even when I'm using a razor for texturing, I would still go in above my fingers because I still want that tension for my razor to be used.
Gotcha.
So then coming into these side sections, the thing we have to think about here is, which we do think about in the LSE recipes as well, is obviously it's very easy at these points to start to make the bob do this on a one length above because our hairline starts to move upwards, so the hair becomes a bit more sparse. And if we don't think about this and take care here, that amazing work you've done here could be gone in 2 seconds because you could take a corner off and you've got to start going again. And that's when we start to get hot sweats, panicky, and everything's a bit dark. So obviously with the LSE, one of the ways we do this is we do the inside out method. So because we normally find that when we're cutting away that way, then the only thing the hair is going to do is get longer. So I almost do that, but I can't really do inside out with my razor because I would start to add too much texture. Because what I would have to do if I was going to go inside out with a razor, I'd have to start to go vertical. So I can't do a blunt and inside out. And I don't want to go vertical because vertical lines create softness, horizontal lines create hardness, and I want to create a hard line even though the edge is a little bit blunt, a little bit perforated. So what I'm going to do as understanding why we do the inside out recipe is I'm just going to do a little bit of a tiny bit of an over direction because if anything, for the same reason, I would prefer these to be a tiny bit longer. And then afterwards, I can then refine that a little bit rather than starting to jump and me being in a world of trouble. And it's just a tiny amount. So all it is instead of following it around to here, that last little bit almost just straightens up. So just from being there, it just straightens up. And then I just know that I've got that extra little bit of safety net, should we call it? Extra little bit of safety net that means that I can then cut this off and I don't have to worry about that jumping up for me. And then let's just get that bit off. I think, is someone asking a question? Oh, they're just saying hello. Hello.
If anyone's got any questions for Rory or myself, then please in the chat, fire away. There's no such thing as a silly question, guys. Okay. Any questions you've got whatsoever, please share them with us.
And again, we just do that pinching technique. I think one of the other key things about this for me as well is making sure that you've got kind of a really nice sharp razor blade. So making sure you've got a fresh razor blade. And even if then as you go through, your razor blade starts to feel like this, because different hair textures will take different levels of ability to cut. If you've got fine hair, you could do it all with a half blunt razor blade. If you do get that thick, coarser hair, sometimes you do almost need to change your razor blade halfway through the haircut because you do want that crisp, like sharpness of the razor blade. So don't also be scared sometimes. Just going to bob under here. Don't be scared to get a new razor blade out and do it that way as well. So then just coming in this side, we'll do exactly the same.
So you've got a guard on that razor. What's the difference between using a razor that's got a guard or an open razor?
So this is going to give me, because it's got a guard, it is it's good for texturizing. It's also good for not cutting myself as well, which is another good thing. But yeah, I mean, you could do this with a regular razor blade, but a regular razor blade obviously gives you a really clean, blunt line because they are a clean blade. So for me, just for texture results, I find that these razor blades work a little bit better for me. And then for the for other types of cuts, sometimes I would go for a more like actual blade, like a full blade.
So what angle have you got your razor there, Rory?
Trying to keep it as horizontal as possible.
Right.
The only thing that might change slightly is when I start to pick a piece up. Like I say, if we do get these few random pieces, I might then just go in and it's still horizontal, but I just go to use just the very tip of my blade instead of using the whole thing. So you can see we're starting to build that section in terms of, now I'm kind of quite happy with the length I've got. I've not gone too short on the sides, and I've got a blunt line. If you came kind of in close, you can see it's also like broken up at the same time. It's a good word, isn't it? Broken up. So yeah, so I've started to build that now. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to work up the head in horizontal sections, doing exactly the same. So I'm going to keep going all the way up. If anyone has any questions, because this is a little bit of repetition, this would be a really good time to ask any questions about the haircut or anything else, if they have any. But if not, we can just take a horizontal section, comb it so we can see our guide, and then we just do exactly the same. So I'll just work this side all the way up. So what I'll probably do actually is I'll just work this side up because this hair's quite thick. Then I'll work into the side on this side, and then we'll see how we're doing for time, because I do really want to show you the end as well. So yeah, so key thing for this also is whenever we're cutting, this hair's been in a clip but not for long, but it has been in a clip and it's started to dry and the roots are starting to bounce up a little bit. You can't really see it on here, but I can see these roots starting to bounce. So I need to make sure my water is on there so I can get all them roots really nice and natural like the last ones, and they're not bounced up, because if they're bounced up, that tiny little bit of bounce might mean that I get the hair a little bit longer or a little bit shorter, and I'm not hitting the exact same line every time that I want to be hitting.
So how much quicker would this be with a razor than doing it with a pair of scissors?
I don't think it'd be quicker. It's just a different effect that it gives more than anything. So kind of, if I did this with the scissors, I'd be doing it with the scissors. Well, I'll show you. If I was doing this with the scissors, I'd be doing it with the scissors, but what I'd be doing is, if I wanted to create that shatteredness, I'd just be point cutting it. So to create that same broken up line, I'd be doing it with, I could do it with my scissors, and I could do exactly the same. So I don't think it's about speed, but I just find you can almost see that even with the point cut there, I don't know if you can see on this, you still just do get a blunter, like broken up line, because I'm going in like this, it's taking it almost like diagonals like that, isn't it? Whereas when I am going in fully with the razor, because it's like much smaller, them areas, like it's almost like the end of my scissors is two of them, it's giving me even more broken upness. I need to think of a better word than broken upness.
We all know what you mean, though. We all know what you mean, Rory.
A bit more broken upness on the ends. It's a good question, Lee. It's not about time for me. It's just about the different looks that I can create by using different tools. And I think what we also have to remember is we're not always. We can cut hair. We can cut hair with anything. So kind of like, sometimes we have our favorite tools and we'll always go to our favorite tools. For some people, that's scissors. For some people, that's razors. Some people, that's thinning shears. But I think a good thing, if we're going to make hairdressing come back and hair cutting be the front, of hairdressing, us hair cutters have to show an understanding for all the tools we have. So we have to have an understanding for how to cut hair, and we can cut hair with any sharp object really, whether it be scissors, razors, thinning shears, but we just know the different effects and different outcomes we get from using them different tools. So they're all tools good to have.
Tell me this, Rory. So obviously people are still having haircuts when they come into the salon, right?
Yeah.
So people are still having haircuts.
Yeah.
But are they just not having such radical haircuts at the moment?
I think I think it's easy for them not to have radical haircuts. And what I mean by that is, you know, we're also, like I said, I mean, I've got nothing against like balayage and things like that, but we're also kind of stuck on colours and balayage. So it's very easy then just to say, and what do you want with the cut? Just a little trim? And then they'll go, yeah. And it's just it's an easy conversation because most girls anyway kind of aren't too bothered about having too much off the hair unless you kind of talk them into it a little bit. So for me personally, it's very easy for you to not do any hair cutting throughout the day. But if you enjoy hair cutting and actually realise what a difference hair cutting can make to a client, to their experience, and to someone who has never had a really good haircut, they will notice it forever. Like, even if it's a girl for me that says coming in for balayage and is very much precious about the length of the hair, 9 times out of 10, I will still do something what I call invisible layering. So I will still add texture and movement into the hair. And for me personally, it's because I know that 90% of people that come in for balayage also want to wave their hair, curl their hair, and get this beachy textured movement, because that's all the visuals that they see, and that's why they're brought to that colour. But we know as hair cutters, if they have just one length solid hair, they can curl and wave, unless they've got really specific hair type, they can curl and wave until the cows come home, but they're not going to get that textured, natural beach wave movement unless they have some internal structures and internal different lengths in there. But so many people with long hair have been scared from hairdressers in the past doing strong layering and over layering hair and having really short pieces that they're petrified of, then allowing a hairdresser to cut internally into the hair. So again, there's a reason sometimes we do cut short layers, but there's understanding other techniques that sometimes just allow us to create softness, texture, but allow the hair to still seem one length. So yeah, it's about really understanding, and then it's about talking your client into having haircuts. And then it's another, I always talk about as well, like we were talking a little bit before on this, there's a lot of very good hairdressers out there, and it's very hard more than ever for hairdressers to kind of make themselves unique and stand out from the crowd, particularly when a lot of the trends are the same type of work. Whereas by doing little things like cutting with a razor, or whether it be things like pre-sectioning before you do a haircut, or whether it be things like actually talking them into some invisible layering when they just ask for a one length trim. It's just another reason that someone else is going to come back to you and not somebody else, because everyone wants to see an expert these days. You know, we have curly hair salons that are just for curly haired people. We have girls that are blonde specialists that just do blonde hair. And I think everyone's kind of forgetting that the true specialist is the hair cutter. Like, you know, a lot of people are specialists in hair cutting, but we don't necessarily show that because we just do trims and little bits and bobs. And we need to almost push that back into our craft and then be like, you know, this is what we want to do for hair cutting. So yeah.
So is the long graduation haircut perfect for all them girls that want that long hair in the balayage?
So perfect. Yeah, and it's understanding the long graduation and understanding how the angles and the different so understanding the basic principles of the long graduation, but then understanding once you've nailed it, how changing things like your finger angle or where you take it to, or over directing it, then makes it adaptable for every single client. Because the person who has the long graduation, where we take a guide maybe from a chin level out here, would be too short for some people, whereas for some people they love it. So all you need to know is, actually my first guide is going to be from, say, like collarbone level, with some soft layers. So once we understand the basic principles of the actual recipe, that's where like you say in a lot of the videos, that's where the excitement happens, because then we know how to tailor that to every individual person. But yeah, I have loads of girls that I use the long grad recipe on, and it's just perfect for all of them, to be honest with you. It just works so well, and it's such a quick commercial recipe as well. Like, it can literally take someone from having one length hair to like amazing movement, texture, layering in literally 10-15 minutes. Like, and that's on.
And can you use a razor doing the one length, the long graduation as well, razor? Rory?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Exactly the same way, you know, you'd just be holding it out, you'd be coming above your, so if we took it to the side, you can see this. You might be able to see it. So you'd be taking it out. I won't do it because I think of it, and then you'd just be coming above and doing it exactly the same. So we'd be creating the exact same lines that we'd be creating regularly in the long graduation, but we're just using a razor for exactly the same reason, to give even more softness and blend on the ends of that hair. But no, definitely.
I'm curious, Rory, how long have you been cutting bobs with the head in a natural position?
I think I've always done it. I think because very early on, from very early stages, one of the first hair cutting courses I ever went on before I was even qualified, I went on a Redken course called Principle Based Design, which is a 2-day course, which actually, funnily enough, is one of the courses I teach now for Redken. But it's a 2-day course that talks a lot about hair cutting, but a lot about shape of the head position, or body position, and all of that. And very early on, it was installed in me where the head needs to be for different reasons. So, we have the head in natural hair fall for a lot of the time, because that's going to give us the most natural finish. A client doesn't walk around with the head down, it doesn't walk around with the head up. And also sometimes by cutting a bob with the head down all the time, we sometimes lose the things that we actually want. So a lot of people cut a bob with the head down to get rid of the graduation, obviously. But if we go back to the French bob I was talking about, I need all that graduation underneath, because that's giving me the chunkiness. And as soon as I pop the head down, I've taken it off. I've taken the hair underneath here shorter, so the hair will sit round it, and I get rid of that graduation when the head comes up and it appears really nice and soft, but it's tapering in. And if I want to create thickness, I can't do that anymore because I've got rid of that graduation. I need a really actual one length line that when the head goes down, it appears that there is graduation there. But that comes with the consultation in the client and saying, to create this shape and to create what we want to create there, we have to give them that graduation, make it neat. You don't want any little bits of hair coming out, but when they pop the head forward, let them know they will be able to see a band of graduation underneath. But that has to be there for when the head comes up, where they live 90% of the time, to give them that hair stand off of the head type of look. So yeah, for me, it's not about I always cut it in the head in natural hair fall all the time. I think 90% of the time I do. I think 10% of the times I know how I can move the head from understanding hair cutting to give myself a quicker desired end result. So if I am looking for a tapered bob, potentially I will cut it with the head forward on the back sections, because I will get rid of the graduation quickly and already give myself some taper. On the sides, you have to be extra careful, obviously, because if we're cutting the head down, then the head comes up. We can see that happening a lot, tipping in front.
And you also find, Rory, that if you cut, because I didn't always cut the head in a natural position. For years and years, I think that I definitely cut the bob with the head down. And one of the biggest things I struggled with, and I don't know about you, but when you cut the bob with the head down, it's very, very hard to judge the length it's going to be when the head's up.
Definitely, yeah, that's a really good point. Actually, yeah, it is hard to, because the thing is, we don't walk around with our head in that position, do we? This is where your head lives. This is where your client's going to, of course, when she's in the grocery store, she's going to put her head down, but she's also going to put her head up as well. We don't also put the heads back to check that, do we? So where she lives 90% of the time, and kind of figuring, like you said, where you want that length to be, it has to be where she lives most of the time. And where she lives most of the time is in natural hair. And there's other reasons for it as well, because obviously, as soon as the client starts to put the head forwards, is it to the side? And if it's to the, because it's harder to see then. And if it's to the side, then we're then getting some form of natural over direction, because when the clients put the head forwards and to the side, some hair's falling out of natural hair fall, which can create over direction. So learning to initially cut in that natural position, I think if you're not confident, I would always start there, and then you can always go on from there. But definitely, natural hair fall. So we've I'm only going to do, because we're obviously chatting a lot as well. So what I'm going to do is I've worked up one side of the head. So as you can see, all I would do is I would do exactly the same up the other side of the head. And eventually we would just have this, as I say, one length line, but it's just very bitty on the end almost. So it's exactly the same. We've worked all the way to the top. And then what we then do is we then just come around to our side section. is here.
I just cut Jess's hair off into a bob.
It looked beautiful. It looked so nice, and that was the type of bob. Yeah, that it looked it was nice. I loved it because it was very chunky on the bottoms, and the way you'd styled it and flicked it out a little bit as well. It looked very like Frenchy, bobby, cool, arty, and it isn't like she had real oomph to the bottom of that bob. I thought was one of the coolest things about it, because we sometimes spend ages thinning them away and tapering them in and breaking them down. But the beautiful thing about that was that real chunkiness that she had there. Yeah, I thought it was very good.
Jess,
very good.
Thanks, Mike. And Jess is like, she's such normally a long-haired girl.
Yeah.
So it was quite a big move for her, because like you said earlier, we put that line, it was intentionally not to be soft and sitting on the shoulders, because then it would have flicked out. We wanted it to, that line to sit there so you could really see it no matter where the head was. And for a girl that normally loves her hair really long and glamorous, I mean, she's buzzing with it, Jess, you know. So sometimes the changes is really good as a rest, isn't it?
It is, and I mean, Jess is obviously also a lucky girl as well, and she will suit something here and she will suit something here. And that's why consultation, as we know, everyone loves to have all hair types, but we do also have to be realistic with our clients. And some people, a bob at jaw length is just not good. They can't not have it, but you have to explain why it would suit them and why it wouldn't suit them. But yeah, if the client's confident enough to wear it, make it striking and stand out. And that's what's then going to make them walk out of the salon or walk out of where they're doing and be like, yeah, it's not just I've had a bit of an extra trim and I've kind of got a bob now. It's like, no, look at what I've done. Like, I've had long hair and now I've got this amazing chunky bob that's like the latest fashion. I think we've got.
So tell me this: if you did a bob like you're doing now, how often would you advise the client to come back in to have it trimmed compared to someone that had their hair very long?
I would say for this haircut, maximum of 6 weeks before they come back in.
And would that be different to a long-haired haircut, Rory?
Yeah, long hair, I would potentially say if they want to do 8 to 10 weeks, because they don't need to keep the shape as much. If the ends start to go a little bit, I know you're not supposed to say this, but it's not the end of the world, because it's kind of the lived-in look that they want to create anyway, 9 times out of 10 with long hair. A bob is a lot more about the structure and the shape of it. And once it gets past 6 weeks, that's when it's gone from here to kind of like here. And then they're in the danger of it then just being it's looking all right still, and it's down here before you know where it is. For them to keep the style and love the style that they've got, I would definitely say, I would say they need to be in 6 weeks.
So tell me this, Rory. I mean, so if they're coming in more often to have their hair cut, that's obviously better financially for the salon than someone coming in with long hair every 10 weeks or something. But would the person with long hair be coming in and having more colour work than, say, the girl?
Not necessarily. I wouldn't say more colour work. They potentially, they would have colour work, but they would also have, you could have, this is the type of style that you could do balayage on. You could do face framing pieces on. You could do loads of different things with this. I think it's, again, more about talking to them through everything. But I don't know the numbers exactly, but if you're getting someone in quite often for a haircut, it necessarily doesn't mean that they will then earn you more or less. I think it's about creating a journey with the client. So talking to them about kind of, if they do just come in for haircuts, where colour would accentuate and where colour would be better for them, and vice versa. But obviously we want them to be in doing as much stuff as possible. So whether we want to be colouring, we want to be cutting, but we want to the best thing I think for a client is to create a journey together, and then they kind of feel, again, it's back to that thing of making them feel special and making them feel the difference between you and the hairdresser next door. So get them in for the colours, the cuts, as often as we kind of can, because obviously lifestyle obviously is a big factor in that as well. But creating the journey and talking about what you want to do with them and where you want them to take them long term, I think is what clients do love a lot as well.
We've got a question here from Faye. It's a great question. Thank you for that question, Faye. Faye's asked, can you use the razor on other cuts? Is there a cut in LSC that you couldn't use a razor on once you've got your head around it?
No, I think if you didn't want to create softness, so if I was doing the one length above and I really wanted that, what I call a sassoon tight bob, I wouldn't use a razor, because if I'm using a razor, I'm creating something I'm going to then have to go back and get rid of later. But in terms of the haircuts, if the end result is for us to create softness, we can use this on, I could use this on a graduated bob, I could use this on any type of haircut, because all I'm doing is it's exactly the same as a cutting line with a scissor. I'm just creating a different edged finish to what I'm doing. So yeah, you can definitely use it in all types of haircuts. But that's a very good question. Thank you.
We've got another question here from Laura. Do you regularly cut the side section before all the back sections? And why is this? As I thought by doing the back sections first would help the balance. Thank you for that, Laura. It's a great question.
Oh no, yes, I would. I always start with the back section. Well, 90%. Yeah, most of the time I start with the back section, particularly with bobs and stuff. Like we started on the back section here, but just for time, I've just done one side and moved on to the side, because you don't want to just see me just cutting and doing nothing else. But you are true, yeah. I mean, kind of finding your level on the back is a good way. But I also do think with a bob, although we may potentially start at the back, it is very important to kind of see there where they want to start it, see it at the front, and then translate that back to the back. A lot of times what I find with hairdressers when I'm training them is when they start a bob, they will just start cutting at the back, and they will kind of just guess where then that's going to finish. And then that might mean that they then have to then start to make it go up or down, or we start to get really strong lines coming downwards because the client actually wanted it at the collarbone. And we thought, start it at the neck, and then you get to here and you're like, oh, damn, I've got from there to make it get from here to here. So these things are real angles. So definitely start at the back, but at the same time, make sure you're doing things like pull the hair to the front and then just take it to the back and get a rough guide of if it's going to be sitting here, where is it going to be sitting back there if she pushes all the hair back? And that'll give you a really good indicator, not precise, but an indicator of where I start the bob at the back. And then take it all the way around. But yeah, 90% of the time, I think a lot of hairdressers do start in the neck, helps with things like balance. But I am an honest, true believer of if we completely understand hair cutting in terms of what happens when we cut the hair, body position, head position, different types of elevation, you can literally start the haircut wherever you want because you understand the process of it. And there might be a reason I might start on the crown and work the way down if I'm doing some form of layering technique, or I might want to start like on the long graduation. I might want to start at the front section and everything work forwards. Like, it's not a definite, but it is a good place to start, definitely. Hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, feel free to ask me more. So yeah, so I've done the back and the sides, and I've got this one length going. So all so on the sides, all I did exactly the same, worked up. Obviously on the sides, we just have to be careful of around the ears in terms of density. So sometimes we can have thin hair, thicker hair, big hairlines, little hairlines, sticky out ears. So all I did is through the sides, my tension just went a little bit softer, and I just had a little bit of a tap there, but I still had to have enough tension to cut, but it wasn't quite as much tension as the back. And it was just, again, if anything, a slight bit of over direction, just so I can then go back at the end if I wanted to refine it. But this is the part now where things do start to change a little bit in the wet cut. So what happens here is, I'm only going to show you on half of it again. So far, what we've been doing is we've been trying to hit that blunt line as much as possible. So we've been hitting that blunt line, creating, like I said, we've been creating a horizontal line because a horizontal line creates bluntness and hardness. And it's only the razor that's creating a little bit of jaggedness on the edge. But we've still been aiming as much as possible to hit the same spot every time. Once I've got to the crown area here now, what changes about that a little bit is, because I'm now thinking I want to think about that taper we talked about in terms of, so it's still one length, but it's softer. All that happens is I still comb it down where it lives. I see my guide there, which is where the line finishes, but I'm going to go 2 centimeters above that line, and that's where I'm going to make my first incision. And all that means that's going to happen is some of the hair from this section is still going to finish on my cutting line, but some of it's going to finish just above my cutting line. And this is just going to start to give me extra softness, which you'll see when we come to my almost finished head. You'll see how that creates that. So I'm just going in here, and then I'm just then starting to come down a little bit, and then that's just starting to take it off. So some of the hair's finishing where I want it to in terms of on the actual cutting line, but just little bits of it are just finishing a little bit above as well. So we're getting the best of both worlds, and then we do that all the way through, and I do my whole crown section in exactly the same way. So we do that. So what we're getting is still that blunt one length, but we're getting even more now start to be a bit softness in the ends as well.
I'm curious, Rory, how important is it for you to get your clients booked in for their next appointment before they leave?
Oh, very important. Yeah, I think it's critical, to be honest. Well, not critical, but I think, again, it's about talking in terms of to your client in terms of making them understand the importance of why we do want them to get booked back in. So if I don't book this lady back in 5 weeks for a cut, there's a good chance in 5 weeks' time she's going to think, oh God, I need my hair cut. And I'm sure Rory said 5 weeks, but then she's probably going to take another couple of weeks to actually figure out when she can get a break from the kids, or where she can get someone to look after the kids, or get a day off work, or find a Saturday that's free, and so on and so forth. So then it becomes 7, 8 weeks, and then it then goes back to that process of, like I just talked about, where we find that they then are coming back in 10 weeks, they've lost the bob, and they'll probably just say, oh yeah, I love the bob, but I might just grow it this time. So I think making them commit at that stage there is very important. But I am also very much a believer of, we're hairdressers, we're not like salespeople or like pushing us. So if you do offer them, you give them the reasons why you're saying 5 weeks, and they still say, I prefer to do it online, I prefer to do it when I get home, then just be like, yeah, sure, that's fine, because at the same time, we don't want to feel like it's just about the money and getting them in 5 or 6 weeks. So the same as when I talk about retail to my staff or anything like that, as a professional, give them the advice that you should be giving them about why we actually believe they should be in 5 to 6 weeks. The same way why we believe they should be using good shampoos and conditioners. But after that, if they don't choose to, that's their prerogative and their decision as well. And as a professional, the same way a dentist would do, the same way as someone else would, we can only give our professional opinion, and then we just have to let them do what they want to do at the same time as well. Thank you. So I am now going to be going on to now. So I've got in my second lady. So obviously this is just been wrap dried. So exactly the way we're doing all the LSE recipes. This has just been a complete wrap dry now. And then what I've done is I've just started to cut the micro fringe in. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to take this micro fringe a tiny bit higher and show you how I do that, because I'm going to do that with the clippers. And then I'm also just going to tiny little bit of just the LSE one-handed straightening, just to give it a little bit of finish. Because as you can see, what's happened from this lady here, so just so we can kind of, if anyone missed that, just to make it 100% clear. So I got this lady to a point where I've cut everything apart from the 2 front sections and the fringe section. So the little triangle here, and the fringe section are my only sections left to cut. And then what I've done is I've left them up, I've wrap dried the rest of it, and then I've let them down and I've wrap dried them and straightened them as well. So it's got me to a point where everything else is already cut apart from this section here, which is one triangle section, this section here, which is another triangle section, and my fringe section. And the reason I've chose to do the fringe section dry, not wet like we do in the LSE recipe, is because the LSE recipe we're doing it at the bridge, so we've got a lot more room for it to jump, it to do different things. Whereas when we're cutting a micro fringe, sometimes if we cut it wet, even with the really aware of everything else, you can never gauge for how it's going to fall naturally. And sometimes you can find it could really catch you out. If we do a really nice natural wrap blow dry, and then a very soft finish with the straighteners, what you can find is you can then get a really precise fringe. And I'll show you how I've started to do it, but I'll show you how I finish doing it in a second. But firstly, while we answer that question, I think that's just popped up, I'm just going to straighten these last couple of sections off a little bit. So are the sections the same size with the razor as the scissors? So section size is nothing to do with the tool that I'm using. It's to do with what I want. So there's two questions it comes to when you're talking about section size. And the first thing is, one, can I see my guideline from the previous section? So with a section size, if I can't see my guideline from the previous section, the section size is too big. Two, if I can see my guideline from the previous section, I then have to think about what finish I want to create on that haircut. So if I can see my guideline, section size then only matters on the finish. So if we want a really precise, neat line, I would be taking small sections because then I can get a very precise finish. Whereas if I want to create softness, there's nothing wrong with doing something called compact hair cutting, where we can take a big section of hair, chop it in one go, as long as I can see my guideline. So all that's happened then is, because I've then had to compress that hair into one, I've just created extra softness. And if that's what I'm wanting to create, it's just stopped me having to do something later on. So you have to be able to see your guideline, but after that, section size doesn't matter. And if you don't understand what I mean, the best way I ever heard it described is if you think of like a big book like the Yellow Pages. If you want to get it cut really neatly, like a precise line all the way through with some scissors, you'd have to take it one page at a time. But if you had some like industrial scissors that were strong enough to cut through the whole of the Yellow Pages, you could cut through it, but there's a good chance the edges would be what I call, again, a bit broken up, a little bit frayed on the edges. It's not wrong, it's not right, it still will take it through. I've just got a finish that's different. So hopefully that makes sense. Firstly, you always have to see your guideline. If you can see your guideline, completely depends on what finish that you want to create on the hair.
Thanks for that question, Mrs. Jones. We've got another one here from Ellie Mae Hardy. For the next trim on a client with this style, would you use the scissors or would you use the razor? Good question, Ellie.
Yeah, great question. So it completely depends if what my client wants and my client's feedback. So if my client came back in and said, I love the bob, but I would prefer it to be a little bit more of like a precise, stronger lined bob, then I would say, okay, perfect. And what I'm going to do now is, and then I'd go back in with my scissors. Whereas if my client said, I loved it, I loved how soft it was, I loved how it tapered in a little bit, then I would then go back in with my razor or maybe my scissors point cutting or whatever, because what we need to try get into the habit of and remember is, it's not a one size fits all for everything. We have to think about what tools we're using and what they're creating for us. So if we want a soft line, razors, point cutting, thinning shears, they're the things we reach for. If we want blunt lines, we want to go for things more like clippers and scissors on a blunt line finish. So really good question, but really try to think about what finish you want on that cut. So we need to think about when we put our scissors in and we close them blades, or we use that razor, other than where we elevate it to or where the hair's positioned, what is the actual thing we're cutting with? What effect is that having on the hair as well? And if we start to think about hair cutting like that, you will find that you really start to understand some of the outcomes that maybe you're getting that you necessarily don't understand sometimes. So I've just moved the little straighteners just for the front section, just in case anyone is wondering what I'm doing with these small scissors now. So we are now moving up to this. So what we're going to do first, once I just get this tiny bit more finished. So really important for a tip for you guys when you are working on the doll's head, this is not when you're working on a person's head, but when you're working on a doll's head, you can get these fringes flat, but you really have to very strongly wrap dry the root so it starts to make it sit flat. Otherwise, they do spring up. So just be careful if you're trying this kind of micro fringe on a doll's head. When you wrap dry it, really get your nozzled blow dry into there and really get it starting to sit flat. And it will sit flat, you just need to work it. On a client, obviously, you won't do that because it'll probably burn them, but on a real person, we can do that. On a doll's head, we can do that. So I've now dried it off. So I'm firstly going to cut these two side sections, and then we're then going to trim the micro fringe.
Another great question from Faye. She said, is it a good idea to have doll's heads with the cuts on to show the clients the different effects it will make?
Yeah, great idea. Yeah. So, I mean, any type of visual things to show the clients love. And if it's a visual that you know you've done, then brilliant, particularly when you're building a clientele up and you know you kind of, it's a great way for people to have confidence in, you know, if you're, the worst thing is, which we all know, if you're marketed, which we sometimes are, marketed as trainee stylist, new stylist, sometimes people worry about your standard and your level of where you're working at. Whereas if you have some haircuts in the salon that are kind of like, look, this is what I can bosh out, then no one's going to worry about coming in and booking in with you. In fact, they'll probably be excited to come and book in with you because they can see the work you've done. So yeah, definitely it's a great idea to have that something sitting there and show them what you've done. So thank you for that, Faye. That's a really good question. So just let you know, now what I'm doing through the sides is, firstly, I'm just using my razor exactly the same. I'm aiming for that same blunt one line, and that's just going to give me a blunt finish. But the reason these sections are really good is because this section over the ear, if you remember, is a section where we can get gaps and stuff. So by having this safety net as these two side sections, I can either keep them really blunt, which is going to add extra bluntness. If I felt they were too blunt, I can then go in, and this is the only time I would then start to use my razor vertically and just piece it out a little bit, and then it can create a little bit of softness on them bits as well.
The colour is looking beautiful, Rory. It really looks classy. I love that, mate. We've got a great question here from Ellie Mae Hardy again. What sort of age range commonly come in and ask for this look?
I think, again, it's a really good question, but it's not down to the age range. It's down to you as a hairdresser. So I have 80-year-old hair clients who have purple hair, strong bobs, you know, graduations, shaved pieces. But that's because me as a hairdresser talks to them, and we go through that, what I talked about, that we go through that journey together. Is if you think, oh, Mrs. So-and-so's 85 years old, she's never going to want this bob with a pink piece through the side. Of course she's never going to have it because you've never allowed her the opportunity to have it. Whereas if you start to talk to her and she then says she does want it, you'd be surprised, particularly by some of your older ladies, how much they do want to be creative and different with their hair. So I would say, of course, this is like a younger haircut, but why would someone at 90 years old? I mean, you see some, particularly in London, you see so many cool ladies walking around Shoreditch who have, I mean, Lee will see it as well, this type of haircut, they're really precise sassoon bobs with the tiny fringes, and sometimes it's that silver white colour, but sometimes they've got a pop of colour in there as well. It's kind of, depends on the client and how they feel, but I would definitely say be open to do anything to any client, really. Don't bracket them to age ranges and what they can have because of their age range.
I mean, it's a good question because I think the bob is one of them haircuts where you could do this on a 6-year-old girl. I mean, look what you've done there. That look that you've done there, that could be worn on the coolest girl in London, couldn't it? A teenager, you know, or early 20s. Or you get women like, you know, Anna Wintour.
Yeah.
You know, director of Vogue that's got that bob, but a slightly longer fringe. I mean, it's really 8 to 80, isn't it?
Of course it is, yeah. It's down to the client and down to you and your journey together.
Great question, Ellie. Thank you for that.
Thank you for the question. So what we're finally going to do now is I've started to cut the fringe in, But now I'm going to start to use the mini clipper, and I'm just going to start to refine my fringe with the mini clipper. So I'm going to turn her to face me a little bit, but just so you can see what's happening as well, just so I can see what's going on. And I'm just going in with a blunt line. I'm just, and don't be scared to use your clipper on clients as well. Some clients
do you use the clippers like that on some of your guys that have the blunt fringes as well, Rory?
Yeah, use it on guys, guys and girls. Yeah, both. Because you're best to add the bluntness first, and then if you need to soften it out, you can soften it out. But I mean, to create like a strong line like this on a fringe, I don't think there's a better tool to at least get you started with it than this mini clipper. I use it so much for this type of work. So I just find it such an easy, quick, effective tool to use.
Does it ever cut the skin, Rory?
No, I mean, as long as you're careful, it won't. Obviously, do a skin assessment, make sure there's no skin tags, no real loose skin. If there is loose skin, we need to kind of press it down so we have a flat surface. Or you can get things like them shields that you can put up. So you can get these like fringe shields, which is like a very thin piece of like perspex almost that has a sticker on that you can stick on people's foreheads, and then use something like this if you're really worried. But I think if you just practice with this on your hand and figure kind of tensions and in terms of pressure of what will cut you or not, a really good thing, I think, the only time that I think they do cut, Lee, is if you don't maintain your blades and they've been dropped a couple of times and they've started to offset a little bit. Yeah. That's when you catch people, because some of the blades reach above it, and that's the part that will nick someone. So 9 times out of 10, if you do find you nick someone, I think either you've not assessed the skin properly and you've caught something like a mole or a skin tag, or you've not looked after your blades 100% and they are a little bit unaligned, and you just have to, there's loads of YouTube videos how you kind of untighten them, oil them up, and then tighten them back up and get them really nice and neat again. So yeah, and with this, we could take this fringe as short or as long as we would want it. I'm now going to turn it back to you so I can start to see the balance. I'll just forward a tiny bit. I'm going to use you guys as my mirror. This is the type of haircutting now I could probably spend 10 minutes doing the rest of the haircut and spend the next 45 minutes doing a fringe, because I just have that much fun, just, sharpening it up a little bit and really getting it absolutely spot on to where I want it to be. But, I mean, if there's any questions about the fringe or the micro fringe or using the clipper on a fringe, then do feel free to jump in and ask it now. And then what I would always do as well with the clipper is I then turn it upside down and I just go upwards underneath, and that gets rid of any of them little graduation pieces, because this fringe I do want to taper a little bit. I don't want it to stick off. So by going upwards underneath it, I'm just taking off any bits of graduation that's encouraging the hair just to start to curl around a little bit. So that's all I'm doing then on that final bit. And because you can see, this is where, going back to the LSE stuff, the sectioning has absolutely nailed it for me here. Because I've used the LSE where we take the high point to recession, even though this is a micro fringe, so it's going to jump wherever it wants to jump, because we've mapped the head out, this fringe is falling where it naturally falls. So we've got no lines coming over here that would be really unsightly, because this is such a strong line. Because we've done the pre-sectioning, I've got this living where it lives naturally. So even when my client goes home, she's going to find that this still works for her 100%, and she's not going to be having trouble with bits of hair falling over to the side and creating lines and things that then look not very nice at all. Any more questions before we start to get to kind of styling and finishing, guys? Is everyone enjoying it? Has everyone learned something?
We have got a question here, Rory.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Ellie Mae Hardy again. Thank you for the questions, Ellie. Why should you not squint when having a fringe cut?
Because it can change. It's just about where the hair lives naturally in terms of, so if we're squinting, sometimes like our heads start to move and all this starts to move and your hairline comes down. God, I need some Botox, I think. But then if it comes back to natural, then the fringe will sit differently. So it's about giving the hair its most natural finish as possible in terms of for when we're cutting on it. So try get your clients not to squint so the fringe isn't living somewhere it doesn't live. Unless they do squint the whole life, then potentially then just let them squint.
Thanks for that, Ellie.
So just just to take you through that now, so I'll show you the kind of the back and sides of this as well, just to show you what we've created. So you can see, even though this is a one length, can you see how this just has a really soft taper into the bottom? So this hair is still coming all the way to the bottom, but it just has that really soft taper that's tapered round. And all I've done is wrap dry this. And when I wrap dried it, I then took my razor again. And if I saw any pieces, I'd just take them, pinch them, and then just take them off, pinch them, take them off, and come all the way around. And so I've just refined that line, but still using just my razor. So it's still one length, but you can just see from the side, it stops it all sitting here. Just gives that little bit of softness in this final 2 centimeters. That is just giving it that express softness that we might have to go back into in the salon naturally sometimes and start doing that to make it start to be a bit softer.
It's a beautiful shape. It's got like an effortless line from the front to the back. And interestingly, you'd never think, looking at that it was cut with a razor, would you?
No, not at all. No, it's just that. It's just because that's because of our cutting line. So because our cutting line was horizontal, we've created a strong horizontal line. So even though I've used a razor to create that soft perforated edge, I've still always worked on horizontal lines. And that's why, again, talking about understanding hair cutting, if we understand what our cutting line does for it, as well as what our finger angle does, as what our elevation does, as what our body positioning does, if we understand all of that, we understand that we can cut with a razor, but use horizontal lines and still really get a blunt haircut. Whereas we could use scissors, cutting blunt lines, they're elevated, and get a very soft haircut. So it's just understanding hair cutting in general. So then I'm just going to finish off to give it a tiny bit of texture with some of the anti-humidity spray, just to give it a little bit of texture and movement, and it smells so good as well, so it's not easy to use. And there you have a one length above razor hair cutted twist.
Love it.
With a micro fringe.
Love the micro fringe. I mean, it's amazing how just changing the length of the fringe can make it look quite classic or really kind of edgy. Out there. Yeah, edgy, you know?
Yeah, if this had just like a longer fringe, it would just be a very nice, very classic bob.
Yeah.
By taking that fringe up and also just all I've done in the color wise is just 2 underneath panels of like a reddy pink that literally you could do in a semi-permanent, a quasi-permanent, talking about when you talked about what would clients have this type of look. Another way is just popping a bit of color underneath around the face. This looks very different and really brings out the shape rather than if she was just blonde all over. So just by adding that pinkness through the underneath, because the blonde still comes over the top, it just adds to the silhouette a little bit as well. So thinking about color, bringing out dimensions and all of that.
It goes very well with the girls side.
I just looked at it.
Really complements it, doesn't it, eh? Looks fantastic. Well, that's been great, Rory. I mean, you know, I've learned a lot. I hope you guys have learned a lot as well. It was a fantastic presentation, mate. So we can't thank you enough for, you know, spending some time with us on a Monday afternoon.
As I said, if there's anything that you've seen today and you didn't want to ask a question or anything you want to ask me about otherwise or anything, just go to @Rory McPhee and honestly ask me anything you want and I'm more than happy to kind of answer any questions. I'm quite good for that. So feel free to ask me anything.
Brilliant. Okay, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you.
And we'll see you very soon. on another Lee Stafford Education Live. We'll be judging the competition very, very soon. We've had loads of entries, so I'm very excited to see what everyone has produced. So have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week. Take care of one another, and we will see you soon. Thanks, Rory. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
See you soon. Thank you.